What's going on, everybody? My name is Igmer, and today I'm going to be talking to John Kropf, professor of political science. We're going to be talking about international relations, public affairs, political theory, something different that we've done. It's going to be very exciting. I'm very excited. It's been a minute since I've talked to him, so it's going to be very cool to catch up. There's a lot of stuff that's happened in public affairs, international relations that I feel like can also influence our domestic affairs. So it's going to be very exciting. And here goes nothing.
And DVC was on Canvas, and I was just like, oh my god! And I just, I'm not good at that stuff, so it was brutal.
Because you told me you like to grade by hand, like your essays, you do it all by hand. So how did you turn it in now?
Yeah, I do.
How is that? How is that going?
I have a friend that I work with that told me once you do it, you'll never go back. And I said, no, man, I like doing it by hand and putting comments and stuff like that. And he said, no, trust me. He's an English teacher. He also teaches at DVC, and he was right.
Bro, really?
Yeah, I mean, because what I do now is I have, I do quick marks, and I have like these a number and a letter, and then I have you click the little box and it opens up and it has a comment in there. So now I just drag and drop. I just drag my comments that I want to make on the papers, and it does go faster. So and it took me a while to get used to it, but then I was like, okay, yeah, I can do this.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm now at the high school. I still read their papers in the hallway out loud to them on Mondays, and kind of grade it as I go and fix things that need to be fixed and stuff like that. So, damn, Ingmar, I can't believe it's been that long then since.
No, yeah.
So, and we didn't have any classes after that.
No, we didn't. Not anymore. Because after that I graduated.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, no, it was sad, but I definitely always kept off with your CropfPoliSciGrotto.com because you have awesome content there. Where I like how you have it like laid out, critical, radical, mainstream. Like I think that's a perfect approach for kids to look at the what's being presented to them.
Yeah, I like to make sure that they're hearing all sides, and then I just hope they take my side. But you never know. And I think that, with information today, most people, if they've got a thinking brain, they'll do the right thing. I have to trust my students, I mean, it doesn't always work, but I kind of feel like if you just say, look, here's the smorgasbord, right? And, read what you can. I think that, when you get them reading stuff that's outside that typical left, right, liberal conservative spectrum, people really take to that. They really like it.
Okay.
So,
like, kind of, what would you call not free thinker, independent?
Yeah,
independent.
Just outside of that box.
The whole,
I think when we talk about Democrats and Republicans, and I think that just gets stale, especially for a lot of young people. I think a lot of young people are thinking that this is like a cul-de-sac.
Right. No, for sure.
Yeah, You
definitely opened my eyes to that in the first class international relations. Cause I took international relations first and then political theory. But then I was like, I'm gonna like this. Like I was like, this is cool. I like how you're saying take him out of the box. Like again, I like how you had the mainstream critical. I do like your critical stuff more. Like
I'm trying to remember what prompt you did if you were in.
I did the Iran for democracy. Iran's fight for sovereignty.
Okay. Because we've for the last few cycles, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 semesters, I've had them working on a prompt on Ukraine and Russia and U.S.
Yeah.
And once again, you get that ability to say, okay, well, there's one side of the debate says that Putin is aggressive and Russia is trying to expand, but then the other side that you don't hear so much, from the mainstream is that this is a NATO thing. NATO is pushing eastward, not so much to find fault, because obviously that and nobody's happy that the invasion occurred, but to try and get people to understand that there was a reason for this. It's not like Putin is some, he's like any other leader who felt like, Russia's security was at risk. So you give them both sides, and it allows them to then, this is what realists say. And of course, here's all the money that's been spent, and that's class system theory. And,
right.
I would say I had never been introduced to the bandera and all of that stuff until I watched. Because again, I was already out of your class, and I was still like, "What's he talking about today?" So you had put a documentary on there called "Ukraine on Fire" by Oliver Stone, I believe.
Right.
And I think that one kind of was like, oh, like I didn't even know that there was a bandera section there. Like,
Stepan Bandera.
yeah, yeah. So that was
he was an evil bastard, man. And he has a lot of followers in Ukraine, and I think that people in this country don't realize that. And now with Trump there, I think it gives that side a little bit of juice, which is probably not good.
So what would you say the devil's advocate side is for like NATO going in? It's just because they put a whole nuclear bomb. They're trying to put a whole nuclear bomb on their what's it called?
What I do is I tell students, what would our president do if Russia had put a hostile military alliance with Canada along the Canadian border and was putting nuclear weapons in Canada or Mexico? What the response would be. It would be an immediate attack on Canada. We would invade Canada. We would get rid of their government. In just the same, and of course, Putin hasn't even done that. He's only kind of taken that Eastern Donbass area. But obviously, great powers, if they feel like their security is being encroached upon, they're going to react. And, back in 2007, Putin warned us. He said, look, you told us in 1992 you were not going to move NATO eastward. You've been steadily moving eastward since 92. And if you go into the Ukraine, that is our red line. We will have to react. And he did. He kept his promise. He said, if you insist on doing this. And then there was the coup in 2014, that overthrew the democratically elected government. And it just, it just sort of snowballed from there. A lot of bragging on our side about all the money and resources that we poured into that country, into Ukraine to kind of get it to come into the Western orbit.
No, yeah, and then to see that Joe Biden's son was like getting $40K a month or like something like
$50,000.
Yeah, something like that. It was an outrageous amount of money that
it's just so and this shows that both sides are. It's just like a total scam all the way around. We're being scammed. So, man, you missed it today. It was crazy.
Oh yeah, tell me about that. So you were just at the No Kings protest?
Yeah, it was twice as big as the first one that I came to in San Francisco last year. Twice.
Can you explain a little bit what No Kings is all about? This is the first time I hear about it. That you told me about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the numbers yet, but I'm gonna guess at around 300,000 people.
Whoa, yeah, because I even on the way here in Lafayette and Antioch, I seen people having No Kings.
Yeah.
On the freeway.
So, this is a reference probably to Trump, I think. And, the fact that he is acting in a much more authoritarian fashion than previous presidents, I suppose. At one level, we got to be careful with this because it's not as if the Democratic Party has been some sort of innocent, waifs that, are just so shocked that Trump is there. I think that there's a lot of criticism that Trump is there because of the Democratic Party. So
I think 1,000%. Like they haven't they don't do nothing for voters. Like, did you ever hear about Force to Vote?
Yes.
I thought that was like their perfect opportunity for them to put Medicare for all on the table to get something out of the Democratic Party. And I just felt like I was very betrayed by Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Sanders that they didn't do, they had one tweet from Bernie or AOC could have got us Medicare for all, and they chickened out. I really do wonder, they probably had some type of I don't know, but yeah, it's crazy.
The Democratic Party is a very large and powerful organization, and once you're in it, I think it's kind of like the mafia. You really have to kind of go along to get along, I think you can get elected on some pretty progressive ideas, I think. But once you get in, the people that are there, they really get to you. That money gets to you. It's just, it's very difficult. I like some of these characters like Bernie and AOC personally, in a way that there's a lot of Republican people that I dislike, as people. But I don't have any illusions about what they're able to do. It's just,
Yeah, because right now I've seen that a kind of a talk around they're trying to run Ro Khanna on Free Palestine.
Yeah.
But like, what you really
Right.
think Ro Khanna
Right.
is gonna do that? Like, I don't know. It's kind of an interesting topic to even bring up because
he's a local boy, I guess.
yeah,
He's from around here,
he's
right?
from right here.
Or
Yeah.
down south a little bit, Santa Clara, I guess.
So we did talk about NATO a bit, but ever since from my class there was no BRICS. Now I want to ask you what do you think about BRICS? Like, what is BRICS, and
You know
how do you
what?
think they're gonna change the global?
That's a great question. I think that there were people that were identifying something like BRICS long before BRICS started, actually.
Okay.
And I think that the best way that you can describe it, I suppose, is just this rise of the global South. I mean, the global South has been suffering under Western imperialism for, God knows how long. And I think that, if you just kind of believe in, sort of basic physics that, for every reaction, there'll be an equal and opposite reaction. I don't think it was any great, prediction that something like BRICS would come together, because it was just a natural sort of a response to, I guess you could say, 500 years of colonialism, imperialism, and the stealing of resources and the condemning of millions of people in the global South. And so you just had to know, I think, at some point early on that something like that would eventually rise, and it has. And I do think it scares, now that it's becoming more organized, I think it scares the crap out of a lot of people in Europe and the United States. I know that what's that old Gandhi saying that, first they laugh at you and then, or
I'm not too.
I'd
have to put it up.
I'm going to screw it up. I'm paraphrasing, but first they laugh at you and then they condemn you and then they, or then they fight you and then you win. It's an old quote from Gandhi, and it's just it's so appropriate, I think, for the times that we're living in, because now they're really scared, and we haven't gotten. And when I say we, I mean all the peoples of the world who have, I think, struggled to fight against a system that I think condemns a lot of people to poverty and misery. We're at the point, I think, now where the worm is turning, and it's got a lot of people on the run, I think.
So do you think this is going to contribute to like the decline in the U.S. dollar?
Well, that was another one that you had in your question here, and I think I'm not the best person to, because I'm not an expert in international finance and economics, but I know that since World War II, at least, the world has sort of used the dollar as the currency of trade. Okay, and I think that it's still going to be that way for a while, because I don't think that some of the countries in BRICS would necessarily benefit from going off the dollar at this point. Okay, but you can see that undercurrent where they're kind of working toward that, and I think that eventually they'll start trading in a denomination that will be different from the dollar. I don't know whether or countries will just use their own currency. I don't know, maybe we'll go back to the gold standard that we had in 1973. But the bottom line is that this could have fairly severe economic implications for the United States, and I think that that's why a lot of people are panicked.
So whatever, see how you had a good chart, and I'll probably put it up for people to see, of how the United States conducts foreign policy. It's like the people they don't like, they're gonna go inside, and it's like the people they do like, it's like shaking hands and everything's smooth.
It's an old Singer cartoon, actually, and it's called Foreign Policy Flowchart. And yeah, it actually, I think it was created after the United States invaded Iraq in 2003, and I think it was just kind of meant to show. I mean, it's funny, but at the same time, when I do it with students and we kind of go through the different permutations, and it finally ends up, at a rectangle where it'll say, failed state, or or the United States
IMF got in there, right. something funky where it
all ends up at some place, and you're like, wow, that sort of that worked. I mean, it went through that process and ended up in the right place. So I think I still have it on my website. I use it in my foreign policy discussion, and it's it's kind of funny when you look at it because you're like, oh yeah, that's fun. I started with that foreign country, and we kind of went through the this whole thing, and it ended up in the right place. What I tell students is there are some countries on there that are a little bit tougher than others. China is one because if you remember correctly, you start with the foreign country and then it'll say dictatorship, democracy, and I think when you put a country like China in there, it's just very difficult because, when I talk to students from China, they really do believe they live in a democracy. And you talk to students here and they're like, oh no, the Communist Party, and it's very authoritarian. And I think, well, it's just different. And actually, people there, I think often, not everyone, but a lot of people probably do think that the Chinese government represents their interests. It may in some ways seem more authoritarian in some respects than ours, but to just automatically describe it as a dictatorship like it does in that cartoon is probably not accurate. And then, of course, what I tell my students is, okay, let's give the Chinese the benefit of the doubt. We'll call it a democracy because a lot of my students think it is. Then the next box is friendly to the U.S. or not friendly to the U.S.
That's kind of tough in itself too, right?
And
What's going on right now?
How do you get out of that one? Because liberals will say, well, the Chinese, they've got, a lot of things that they make for us, and we give them a lot of money, and why do we want to screw that up by having a war? And then there'll be more national security hockey types that'll be like, no, they're trying to take us over, and we need to be ready to go to war with them. We had one crazy general last year, I think, that said something like, by 2027, we'll be at war with China. Right? It's just, oh, come on.
Right. There's a guy that was like saying we're gonna sink their ships to Davy Jones's locker. It's just like, what?
Well, some of it is just like, because a lot of these guys, I think they just need to look tough, to appeal to some sector of the American population that gets off on that kind of rhetoric. But some of it's real. There are some true believers out there that really think that China represents some existential threat to the United States. So then getting out of those boxes becomes difficult. Does China, really want to have a multipolar world where all the nations of the earth kind of come together equally and, try to work out problems that we all face, okay? Or, is this some sneaky sort of backdoor way to kind of displace the United States as the number one country or the most influential country in the world? And that's kind of where we are right now. We've got.
So you feel like they could take the unipolar spot, or like is there like signals to that?
I don't see them. I really see China and Russia right now as sort of recognizing that the 21st century is not going to be like the 20th century, and that we all now as a species face problems that one country cannot solve alone, and that we're going to have to work together. Now, some people say that this is just phony rhetoric and they're just trying to kind of pull the wool over our eyes so they can take us over and blah, blah, blah. But that just doesn't seem logical to me. Like, take us over. What the hell does that even mean?
Right.
Take us over.
Like, you're talking about, like, we can't even take ourselves over.
Right.
Like, here.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
It is a kind of an absurd, like, thing. You would think we would take it over here first. I kind of don't want to get used to, but right, like, it's kind of an absurd.
It just seems like a ridiculous notion. And I know that, like I said, there's true believers on that side that really do believe this sort of, I guess you could call it 19th century or 20th century sort of mentality that, there has to be some great power or some power has to rise to the top. But I don't know, man. I don't know if we're living in that world anymore.
Because, one thing that I would say that I kind of see, but I'm not sure. Maybe you could like give me more insight on this. Because you kind of showed me one of the books. It's called The History of the Peloponnesian War. Thucydides, right? Yeah. And you see, like, there's Sicily, like, different countries that are having kind of, like, conflicts. Kind of what you would say, like, kind of the start with Syria, Palestine, like, different things. Do you kind of see that as those little kind of, even with Taiwan, people always talk about, oh, Taiwan, or like, Iran, what's happening right now. Do you feel like those are kind of those little, what would you say, like, fire alarms that are going off? Or no? You don't think that?
Well, I think that, the only thing that you, I guess, can, expect to see in the world is, constant change. I mean, I think that I know that a lot of theories about how the world works, especially from international relations, I think rely a lot on realism and theories that we've used to describe how, nation states and human beings have interacted with each other for millennia. But I think that I don't know, we might be reaching one of those inflection points in history where, people just start to realize that the old paradigms don't really work anymore. I mean, we're in a nuclear age now, and really, when you think about when you think specifically about realism, about this need to stay number one, or that there has to be a number one country in a nuclear age, like what's the end game there? I mean, it's like total human extinction. And so will the old models, work in the 21st century? I just don't think they will. I think we're living in a different time now. We have these environmental threats that we all face, that it's not like, one country. I mean, obviously in the developed world, we'd be able to ride out climate change probably a lot easier than people would be in the developing world, where, a lot of people live in very low-lying areas, or they live in areas that are susceptible to drought, or, and so they're going to have food supply problems. But no one's going to come out of this unscathed. I think even the billionaires are going to feel this, and you can tell because that's why they're buying property in New Zealand and buying, Bill Gates has got some underground thing that on some island that he bought, in Hawaii. He's for real. He's got some. It's like a bunker.
So it's like the whole Lahaina thing, all those things that happen, right? With like
they're scared. They're even. I mean.
No, I'm saying like that they did all of that stuff probably to buy that stuff up and build their stuff there.
Yeah. They're trying to go somewhere to get away from what they think could be some sort of a calamitous, human situation. So they even know that they're susceptible to all these problems. I mean, but of course, the people who are going to feel it first and hardest will be the poor of the world, which is most people of the world. So, yeah, I mean, the human species faces challenges, I think, that we just have never seen before in the human experience. And so we really have to start questioning whether we need to sort of rely on Thucydides, who wrote 2,500 years ago. I mean, to his credit, he did, I think, write very interestingly about conflict between, in his day, city-states, I suppose, Athens and Sparta, but yeah, whether or not that's the kind of challenges we face in the 21st century, so many years after he wrote, I think is really an open question.
Okay.
So, we need some imagination, I guess.
Okay.
I think, I see it in younger people. I don't see it in people, I'm a boomer. I don't see a lot of boomers that are very imaginative. They seem to kind of, a lot of them anyway, fall back on, I don't mean to be ageist, but but they do seem to fall back on a lot of like old ideas that, I think need to be transcended. We need to kind of move beyond. And you can see in the younger generation that they're, they have a little bit more imagination, and so there's some hope there.
I think that does bring a lot of hope. Yeah, I like certain like things that you put on there, like the Gray Zone, like Aaron Monte, Max Blumenthal, even the Jimmy Dore show. I feel like those things give me hope.
Yeah.
To have like a better just out, or like gives me, I guess, a bit of idealism to a certain degree.
It's funny, this with the technological revolution, the way it's played out. It's got this weird kind of it's a strange dichotomy where, on the one hand, when you talk about those alternative media and of course, like stuff like this,
right.
It really gives you a lot of hope. You think, wow, I mean, there's going to be some information that gets out there that wouldn't have never been able to get through the legacy media. At the same time, as a teacher, I struggle with students who spend a lot of time using technology just to basically distract themselves from, all the crazy stuff that's going on out there. And it's frustrating because you think, dude, you're like, you're almost there, just keep swiping, don't stop caring about what your friend ate for lunch, or
Right.
or some weirdo that's doing some weird dance on TikTok or whatever, and start reading this stuff. And so we're in this weird period, I think, especially media wise, where the potential is certainly there, but whether the young people really kind of grab onto it and use it in a way that helps to improve their lives, I think is still an open question. There's a lot of distraction.
Right. Yeah. And I think the AI is making it even like worse with like, how are the papers going with that? Like AI and stuff. Like, did you be able to catch on right away with it? It was like
I was late to the AI game, and I'll be straight up with you right now. I've never used any kind of AI or ChatGPT, or I'm not a Luddite. It's not like I walk around, or drive ride a horse to work, or what I mean. I'm not growing, vegetables on my apartment patio. I still go to the store to get my food, but I came very late to that game, and I really just sort of, in the beginning, I just sort of like blew it off. I was like, oh well, this is stupid, and I don't really care. Man, it happened fast. It was just sort of like all of a sudden, it was just, oh no, kids really are, just saying, write me a paper that says this. And it was interesting in the beginning, before, teachers had the technology to kind of catch that stuff. I was pretty good at just catching it. And when I would read papers, I'd be like, did you
said that?
You said this? Wow. And so you really could tell the difference between somebody, just because I've read so many papers in my career,
right.
You can kind of tell that AI is not.
Like this guy writing like Mearsheimer.
No, exactly. Actually,
he was like, write me a paper like Mearsheimer.
Better than Mearsheimer. That's how you catch it.
Crazy, no freaking way.
But it's interesting because you really can't tell, and then usually I would say, this sounds not very human, and most kids would admit it. They'd be like, okay, well, and I've always believed in Nietzsche's or his axiom, or he had a quote where he once said that you should mistrust those in whom the impulse to punish is strong. So I'm not into punishment. So what I'll tell students is, hey, can you write this for me again? I really want to know what you think about this. Right. Okay. And I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to, and I'd say 9 times out of 10, they're not doing it because they're bad people. They're doing it just because, they're working a lot of hours, they're behind the curveball in some way. So
some of them be like international students too. They come to DVC, which is crazy, right?
Right. And a lot of them, I think, worry about their grammar, and I always tell them, don't worry about your grammar. Just keep. In fact, this paper will help you with your grammar. You know, just get better at your grammar. I'm not going to give you a low grade just because you didn't, cross all the T's and dot all the I's. If you're from Asia or Africa or somewhere else where this is a second language to you, don't worry about it. Just do the best you can, and it'll help you, to learn English. You'll go back to your home country if you decide you want to do that, and you'll be a much better English speaker for it. So, I try and make it so that they feel comfortable just being themselves. And I also tell them, if I disagree with you, I'll tell you, but I'm not gonna lower your grade just because you've taken a different position on this. I know a lot of people, especially on the right, think, oh, well, the university is filled with liberal professors. And
no, I think that you were like the whole like alternative thing where I was like, whoa, like, well, and I've never gotten a perspective like this. Where
I've had lots of conservative students that did really well in my classes, and they're always like, hey, thanks. I thought, you were going to ding me grade wise. And it's like, no, that's not what this is about. This is, this isn't even about grades. This is about, this is what democracy looks like, right? This is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be having a conversation. And it doesn't mean that we're going to agree. Now, having said that, I'm sure there's professors out there that, if you don't write what they want you to write, they're going to punish you. And it could be somebody that's a right winger or a left winger. It doesn't really matter, I guess, but it shouldn't be like that. Yeah, you should just open up the dialogue and, just say, hey, you did a good job trying to prove your side of this. Okay. And you got some good data here to back it up. We're having an educated conversation now. So, here you go. There's your A. And, but but you're wrong.
For real. You know, there was a question that you had on one of your things. You still have it today, I think. And I honestly, to this day, I wanted to know what you think. Because you always ask us what we think. This time I wanted to ask you what you think. It's chapter 17 of The Prince.
Oh.
You ask kids, what do you think like a nation state leader should be like? Is it better for him to be feared or loved?
Right. Machiavelli.
What do you what do you think? Or if you don't, that's okay if you like still keep it.
It's always a good question, but I think, you know,
It always just left me thinking. I was like, what does Mr. Kropf think?
I think I finally figured out the answer to that question when I became an anarchist. And I think now you got to flip the question, because Machiavelli, who wrote in 1513, you know, when he wrote The Prince and the Discourses and other works, he was writing for leaders and what leaders needed to hear in order to have power.
Okay.
And I think what the conclusion that I've come to is that leaders need to fear us.
I love that you said. I love that you kind of flipped it, because he was writing to leaders back then, like what you should do. But it's kind of like, what should the masses do now, right?
The masses need to make the leaders fear, not the other way around. And I think when we finally get to that point, if we get to that point, that's when we're probably going to see some positive changes in the world. Because I think most people of the world, you know, I have a pretty optimistic view of human nature. And I think most people of the world, they want to get along. They just want to live. They want to be able to live with some dignity and have, you know, the basic things that you need in life just to, you know, to be able to feel like you're living a good life. And I've come to the conclusion that leaders, and it doesn't really matter, I think, what their ideology is. Their ideology is power. That's all they really care about. And I think that once people, you know, come to the conclusion that we're the ones that need to have the power, and we need to utilize that power responsibly, and we need to share the power with each other and work on problems collectively as a species, then we're going to start seeing some really good changes. In other words, we can't rely on leaders anymore. And it doesn't matter if we fear them or love them. They need to fear us and the power that we have as a collective. And then humanity might be able to take a step forward.
So this was kind of goes down to a question that I had was, what is power? Like, I feel like people write whole books on this, and it like drives me insane.
Well, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds philosophically on this. I will just say that when I was at Cal State LA many years ago, I was working on a master's in political science. I had an instructor who I think has probably long passed. His name was Edward Malachy. He had us read a book from he was a historian of science, or a philosopher of science. And his name was Kuhn, Thomas Kuhn. And he talked about, like I said, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here. He talked about paradigms and paradigm shifts. In other words, in the world of science, when the way people think is, he said, you know, is completely thrown out, and then a new way of thinking takes hold. And he used this instructor that I had, Edward Malachy. He used this this metaphor from the book called phlogiston theory. I don't know if you know what phlogiston is, but a long time ago, before they knew that fire was, you know, the fire triangle, you know, oxygen, fuel, air, people believed that something burned because it contained something called phlogiston. And if it didn't have phlogiston, it wouldn't burn.
That sounds crazy.
Okay. And then people realized that there is no such thing as phlogiston. And they completely threw that theory out and then developed a new theory. And he was talking about chemistry. And then my instructor said, it's quite possible that power is the phlogiston theory of politics. In other words, we've been thinking that power is what has to be analyzed for thousands of years, and we might be completely wrong. And maybe power is something we cannot understand at any kind of a level that appears useful to us. And it was, you know, there's that, you know, idea of, you know, but it kind of blew my mind. I remember when he said it in class, and I wasn't really sure. It was only a class of about 8 people, and I wasn't really sure that anybody else, because he said it, and then I think he stopped, for that pause, to kind of see how
anybody
reacted, and I was just sort of like, whoa, like I'd taken like some monster hit, on the thought bone or something, and I was just like, wow, that's pretty deep, man. I mean, maybe all this concern that we have over power is missing something. I mean, I to this day I still don't know what it is that we're missing, but we might be. Thomas Kuhn thought of paradigms as puzzles, and he said that whether it's a community of physicists or chemists or biologists, they all sit around that puzzle, and they're trying to kind of put the pieces in, right? But what Kuhn said is sometimes the puzzle, they just push the puzzle off completely and put a new puzzle down because they say, well, we were working on the wrong thing, okay? So like Ptolemy, and then gives way to Galileo, who gives way to Newton, who gives way to Einstein. Okay?
Right.
And each time, it's the whole paradigm that's pushed off. It's the whole puzzle that's pushed off. And so we've been sitting, political scientists and philosophers have been sitting at this puzzle for thousands of years thinking, well, this is the power puzzle. We just need to put all the pieces in place and then we can understand. And I think what, Professor Maliki was trying to tell us is maybe we're looking at the wrong puzzle.
That's an interesting, because down this is like Hacker House, and like downstairs, some guys are flicking some code base, and they're just like, "What if we just threw this whole shit out?" And it kind of makes me think, are we looking at an old repository?
Yeah.
And we're just
but
that's an interesting.
But what replaces it? That's the rub. I mean, that's
Right.
the part that I can't get my head wrapped around, because it's like, okay, well, I can accept that maybe analyzing power is just making us go in circles, and we're not really moving ahead as a species because we think that power, I don't know, but what do you replace it with? I don't know, love,
So
kindness. It's almost something that maybe the human brain has not evolved to the point that we can understand. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a
great
tough
mystery.
one.
And of course, there would be people who were spiritual that would maybe see something metaphysical. They maybe say, well, this is where, the power puzzle has to be put aside, and you need to sort of relinquish yourself to some spirit, God, Allah, Yahweh. I think metaphysics, sometimes the reason for that is because a lot of the puzzles that we're trying to solve about our existence and about how we understand ourselves as a species and how we interact with each other politically doesn't really seem to make sense. And I think that opens the door to metaphysics, I guess, which why human beings need religion.
Right. No, I think you're opening up a good argument for that, and I think that a lot of people. I think a lot of. I don't want to say that geopolitics happens because of that, because I think a lot of it, how you're saying, natural resources, billionaires are like, that right there looks like I could use it for my company. But I feel like they also use that as a thing to like kind of like here, like blindfold you real quick.
Right.
But I do feel like a lot of how can I say, superficial stuff happens in those countries.
Yes.
And I think that's like another thing where I'm like, I can't deny this kind of stuff sometimes.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, is it the Matrix, like they call it? Like, certain things were happening where it's like, you can't have this right now because like your path is supposed to go here. Like,
I mean, I think that was at least, I think that they started that whole series, that philosophy book series that looks at the philosophy of various movies and the philosophy of Bart Simpson and stuff. I believe it started with The Matrix. I think that whole series of books started with the movie The Matrix, and probably for good reason, because the whole idea of what is reality, I think is something that we all wrestle with. That whole debate within philosophy of materialism versus idealism, and I mean, I don't think we've reached a point where we really kind of understand all that stuff yet.
So another thing you mentioned right now during the podcast is you feel like you're an anarchist. And, that's one of the first times I heard about anarchism was kind of in your class. They don't teach us this in like 8th grade to 12th grade. They tell us democracy,
Yeah.
like intro to democracy, little different
Well,
things.
they can't.
They
can't
can't,
teach you
and they
that
can't
stuff,
teach you
no.
that stuff. It's kind of crazy. So, but I kind of like again like during that time at DVC, they took us off and moved us all to Zoom and Canvas, and it was like the new age, the new digital age, kind of just
Right.
came about, kind of.
Yeah.
So it was kind of forced too. Like obviously, you weren't even prepared to learn how to use Canvas,
Nope.
different things. But it got me a little sick because there was a topic, how you're saying anarchism, that was coming up, and I feel like it would have helped me a lot more being in your class, seeing what the classmates' reaction would have been to the movie No Gods, No Masters. I think that's a cool thing that you have on there. I hope people watch that. Like I really do hope people watch that. Like it's a great film, and that kind of leads me to your question to like what do you know about Buenaventura Durruti?
Not very much. I don't
Okay.
know a whole lot about the Spanish anarchism movement. I mean, there's a lot. Anarchism is a pretty big grouping of ideas, and I think that the Spanish Civil War fits into that really in a very, very interesting way, because I think that after the Paris Commune in 1871, I think the next big attempt at creating an anarchist society was probably the Spanish Revolution. All right, but I think that Durruti and all the others that were trying to kind of make this world come into being were up against a system that was just not really prepared to allow that to happen, to allow ordinary people to have power. I think that's always been the challenge of any kind of commune or any kind of collective society is, like Emma Goldman said, how do you maintain the sanctity of the individual and yet support the collective at the same time. And I think that's always been the job of anarchism as a set of ideas, and anarchists as a group of people, is to figure out how do we make sure that we maintain the integrity of the individual, but at the same time the collective sort of simultaneously. Because
that's what you mentioned, that it's like subject to always adapting. I remember you always mentioned that, like, it's always going to adapt. Like,
it's a trend. I think the problem with anarchism is that a lot of people who say that it's utopian, because no anarchist believes in utopia, or no anarchist. I mean, Durruti didn't, obviously. I think that one of the big problems with it as a set of ideas, and I call it a set of ideas and not an ideology, is that I think that you have to kind of start with just a sort of a basic kind of a belief about what human nature is, and then sort of go from there. And I think most anarchists are very positive about human nature, and they believe that most humans just want to be able to experience freedom and to not be subject to any kind of oppression or hierarchy, okay? So whether it's a racial hierarchy or a gender or hierarchies based on sexual orientation or class or anything, I think anarchists reject all of those hierarchies and believe that all human beings should have an equal power to kind of decide collectively the kind of world that we want to make. But like Noam Chomsky says, we're not probably smart enough to do that yet. And so you have to see anarchism more as a trend, where you see, things happening slowly over time, or rather than all of a sudden humanity, like this light goes off and we're like, oh yeah, power, we don't need that, and leaders, there's no use for them, and it just the world probably doesn't work like that. And so you see this advancement of humanity, since we crawled out of the slime, I guess. But most of that is just based on this concern for freedom and some hope that other people will feel that freedom also. And so it's better to see it as a trend rather than some final blueprint for how society is supposed to operate. Because I think Chomsky's right. I don't think we're smart enough to kind of figure that out yet. But we can see things like at the No Kings rally. You can see people, rejecting this sort of authoritarianism, or this belief that these leaders who are making decisions that affect our lives, that there's millions of people that are not okay with that.
Right.
And that are resisting that and fighting back against that. But that's a trend. It's not some like, boom, it's done. And look at us, we're living in utopia. I think anarchists don't believe in utopia. I think they believe that human beings will always, as long as there's human beings, there's always going to be conflict.
Right.
The question is, how do you resolve that conflict? And I think that for thousands of years, we've believed that you resolve conflict like this in a triangle. With a few people on top telling everybody else what to do. And anarchism is a circle. You don't know where the power is because it's everywhere and nowhere.
Dang, that's kind of veiny that you say it like, cause what? That's kind of like,
we're all
you
leaders.
can see them at the top, but it's like, oh shit, if all these motherfuckers could take me out,
right?
Yeah, I see.
That's the way power is organized in what we call civilized society. But where's it gotten us to? We're almost to human extinction. Anarchists believe that, one of three or all three things are going to happen to us. Either one, there's going to be some nuclear conflagration between great powers that's going to end humanity in about 30 minutes. Two, a little slower, but some sort of economic or environmental catastrophe that is just going to kind of basically, end human beings' ability to survive on Earth. Or social breakdown, like the kind that we're seeing now, where people just kind of go at each other. Everybody hates everybody else, and shooting and killing, and becoming addicted to all kinds of things that are not healthy for us. And it's one of those three things that's going to do humanity in. And this sort of triangular way of organizing has brought us to where we are. Okay.
Right.
And now we need to start to tell ourselves, leaders don't have the answer. They are the problem. They are not the solution. We ourselves are the solution. And we just have to figure out a way to organize ourselves to a point where we can, start, convincing people that, we don't need leaders. We can lead ourselves. I think in an anarchist situation, there's no leaders, there's no followers. Everyone's a leader, everyone's a follower. You work together in a very democratic way, where you share power with other people. The other thing that's interesting that I thought was interesting about anarchism is it's the one set of ideas where people can learn to be good losers. Where you learn that, well, I can't always have my way. I can't have things the way I want it because it's not about me. It's about we. It's about us. But I feel like my voice was heard. You know what I mean? It's like, yes, the group disagreed with me, but they let me speak. My voice was heard. And so, yeah, maybe they're right. And maybe, I am being selfish, or I am
right. Maybe I'm just being like
too much into myself.
Yeah.
But I think when you organize society like in a triangle, that's what people don't feel like their voice is heard. They feel like the powers that be, the few people at the top, the billionaires, the governments with power, people feel like nobody listens to me. No one hears my voice. And I think that's what causes people to do like crazy things,
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're kind of hitting the nail on the head. Like
hurting other people,
kind of causes people like imagine from high school, you ain't feel like you heard, like from going to like to work. Yeah, just different things. Your mom might not heard you like out like that. Your dad, like, it's just like, I think you're kind of hitting a nail. And like hierarchy starts from a kind of like your home, you know? Like that's kind of what is. I don't know if it's Aristotle or Plato that says it. I'm not too sure. One of those.
Confucius too. A lot of them believed in. They had that sort of familial idea that the father at the top and the mother, and then everybody else obeys. I think the problem with that model is that it sort of infantilizes people, because I suppose when you're young, it's good to have parents. But you don't stay a little kid for your whole life. Eventually, you become an adult. Okay,
right.
And adults don't want to be treated like little kids. Okay, so when I was 4 years old, I was good. I was glad that I had parents. But I'm not 4 years old anymore, so I don't need a daddy. Okay, I can think for myself, and I can work with other people who are thinking, rational, logical human beings. And do we need to look to people above us to tell us how to live and what to do and how to run our lives? I don't think so. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like this. You know, if I see a little kid about to run out into the street and there's a car coming by and I grab his arm and I pull him back, I have interfered with his freedom, right? Because he wanted the freedom to run across the street. But see, I can justify that, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, but it's like Chomsky says, you know, any form of authority has a heavy burden of justification. Okay. So if somebody says, hey, you know, the kid wanted to run across the street in front of that car and you didn't let him, I can say, well, I think this was probably better for him. Okay. And when he gets older, he'll probably say the same thing. But, you know, once you become an adult and you've got, you know, governments telling you what to do and how, you know, then it's different. Then it's kind of like, no, I'm not. You have power over me, but it's not.
I see what you're kind of saying.
It's
That's
not justifiable.
Holy crap! Like that opens a whole can of worms.
It's not justifiable. I mean, Chomsky is well known for saying that any sort of hierarchical relationship carries a burden of justification. So you can't just say because I have the power to do it, that's why. And you hear a lot of leaders today say that. Mm-hmm. I have the power to do it, you know, and it's not right, and it's not moral. Might not even be legal, but I got the power to do it. Okay, and you know, most of that stuff is just not justifiable.
Shit, okay.
I mean, I recognize you have the power to do it. Doesn't make it right.
Okay? Right.
So, and that's what anarchists, I think, have been saying for many, many years is that, you know, you need to justify the authority and the power that you have over others. And if you can't do it, then we ought to be, you know, we ought to be dismantling that.
Shit, that kind of like, I like that you kind of use that analogy of the kid crossing the street because out here they're putting shit out like Palantir, like different things. And how you're saying, like, they could make anything. How you're saying they could be authoritarian and be like, no, you can't do that shit. Like Palantir saw you.
Right.
Like how you're saying, like that's what I'm saying, open up that can of worms, but it kind of, how you're saying, kind of like, holy shit, like they could say anything is like freaking like.
You know, Palantir is just like any other these companies. I think that they thrive on people's fear. Mm-hmm. And so people will say, well, but, you know, what was it that, what's his name said a couple of weeks, or I don't know how long ago he said this, a couple of months ago, Larry Ellison, the guy from Oracle, said something like, everybody's going to be on their best behavior because everyone's going to be surveilled. And it's kind of like, that's not the way people, you know, operate. And that's not, you know, they don't want that kind of, you know, and, you know, yeah, okay, I know you have maybe the power to do this and you have powerful people that'll set it up. But what are you going to use that for? All right. And what do you mean behave? Mm-hmm. What does that mean? I mean, I know not to cross the street when there's a red light.
Right.
Okay. But, you know, what about what I was doing this afternoon? Was I misbehaving? Was because I was, mm-hmm. you know, using my First Amendment freedoms to, you know, speak out and march against what the government's doing? Is that misbehaving? Mm-hmm. Who's to decide?
Right.
And I know these guys want the power to be able to do that, but I'm not sure that we should give it to them.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we cannot let these motherfuckers do that shit. Like, it's scary, man. It's fuck, dude. Like,
I'm very, you know, very concerned about this. And I think if you look at some of the people that, you know, run these type of platforms and algorithms and stuff like that, they don't seem very stable to me. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of these people are just, they're really scary. Their worldview, you know, the way they see things. And like I said, I'm just kind of at the beginning of sort of reading about, you know, Yaris Varoufakis wrote a book a few years ago called TechnoFeudalism. And, you know, this whole tech revolution, you know, some of the people that are running this, I really question their politics. And like, not to a point where I don't think that I think they have a right to believe politically whatever they want, but I get the feeling sometimes that they want to impose it on the rest of us. And that's just, I'm not okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable.
It's a yeah, that kind of like brings up like on Instagram, I like that you say like the people at the top, like they're imposing this weird stuff. Like on Instagram already, I've seen people getting digital ID'd.
Yeah.
Like, and I know that in the UK, it's already like full on enforced. Like they're like, you can't surf the internet without your digital ID. And that is scary because imagine how us watching No Gods, No Masters on YouTube with our digital ID, they're gonna be like, what are these guys up to? Like,
Well, I mean, I think they already have the
oh
technology.
yeah, they definitely have, but I'm just like, now it's more like, how do I say? It's a profile, like a whole. Like, and they probably been had the profile here saying, but it's like, I don't know. It's I can't believe that people are just letting this happen, not doing like saying like, I don't know. It's just scary. I think that digital ID thing is like one of the craziest things that you could do right now.
Yeah.
And I feel like how you're saying, I feel like my generation would almost be like, what? Like, why are we even like letting this be a thing? Like, we wouldn't. We shouldn't even sign up. Like, we should be like, Instagram, hell no, we're not using this no more.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what's that old saying that they have in the business world? You know, if you're not the customer, you're the product. And I think that this is the way a lot of these tech companies operate, I think, is just to amass as much information about, you know, what we watch and where we go and what our consumption patterns are. And of course, we know that they work very closely with the government. I mean, that's not a secret. I mean,
Right.
And so I think it is possible that maybe people have just not, I think, come to the realization of how dangerous this sort of thing can be, or the potential for it to be. And I don't know what it'll take to get people's consciousness to that point where they're just sort of like, yeah, okay, I'm not really sure I want this sort of surveillance in my life. And they do it. It is very kind of nefarious the way they do it, because it's never done all at once. It's just sort of like slowly chipping away, you know, a little bit here. You know, you have the Patriot Act, and then cameras everywhere, and then, you know, the digital ID. But it's not like something that they do all at once, where people are just like, they just they sort of knock it down. Slow rollouts. All right, so that all of a sudden.
So yeah, like Bitcoin came out in 2008. Like, what do you think about how? Are you into crypto at all?
No. In fact, it's funny.
This is a crypto.
Well, no, I got a funny story about crypto.
Yeah.
A few years back, I had a former student from College Park who sent me an email, and he said, "Hey, it's been a long time since I've seen you. I'd love to get together with you." And I thought, great, let's have some lunch. And so I told him, yeah, meet me over at this restaurant in Concord, a Lazy Dog or something like that. I said, I'll buy you lunch. Okay. And I thought, just some former student who just wants to kind of catch up, right? You know, oh my God. So we sit down, and before the menus even get there, this kid, he launches into this pitch for crypto. And he says, Kropf, let me just explain something to you. And he talked for 45 minutes straight. I kept having to tell the server, you know, one more minute, you know. I mean, he wouldn't stop talking. And he was like, dude, you know, you got to get this into this crypto thing. He goes, I'm about 10 large into it right now. It's going to explode. You know, you're going to be rich. It's a Ponzi scheme. You know, I mean, that's all it is. It's going to implode. Okay. Like all bubbles. Okay. You know, I'm not an economist, but I've read enough to know that
enough Michael Hennessy, enough. Because
this is going to collapse. You know, what it looks like when it does, and, you know, whether the government is going to be, you know, have enough nerve to actually bail some of these maniacs out, I think is, you know, we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people that are really into Bitcoin large get bailed out by the government. I mean, because they've already done it with the banks. And so, and, you know, Trump is, you know, he's already made lots of money.
That's so funny that he came up to you and asked you. I think that's like, so funny because one of the first things that you come to, and you did it in both like semesters that I did it, you're like, I'm not an economist. Don't ask me for financial advice in stocks or anything. He's like,
no investment advice. So I told him, I said, at the end of his thing, I said, look, two things. First of all, I don't have any money to invest in. You know, I'm barely, you know, surviving as it is. But second, honestly, I don't really understand this enough. I think it's too risky for me. You know, I don't have any money to lose. And I think he was very disappointed. He got a free lunch out of it. Now, of course, this is before crypto collapsed. And then it did. It did. You know, it sort of climbed back from when it collapsed, and, you know, whenever it was.
Went to 72, went back to like 30 probably.
Right. And I was very concerned about this former student, because I thought, and I didn't get a call from him either, because I kept thinking, that he might call and say, "Oh, hey,
you were right.
I'm glad you didn't buy into this."
Right.
But he didn't, and I hope he didn't lose a lot of money. He was a nice kid, but it just kind of showed me that it's kind of like Ponzi schemes in the past, where economists have a word for it or a phrase for it. They call it the greater fool theory, where the idea behind any one of these Ponzi schemes is that you bring people in and you say, hey, you try this, and then eventually the bottom falls out, and whoever bought last is the one who's going to lose all their money.
The greatest fool,
right?
Yeah.
But then all the people that got a bunch of people in, okay,
now they're going to get mad at you, and they're going to be like, "Damn, that's
yeah, and you can't really get mad because it's kind of like what is it, caveat emptor, buyer beware. And so if I bought into it like this kid wanted me to, I could hardly blame him if it crashed and I lost all my money. It was like, well, that was my fault for not really kind of studying it. But that's the thing, is I've studied a little bit, and I realize now that and it gets even darker than that, because there's a lot of different theories about where this all started. I guess there's what's that Japanese guy that's
Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yeah. But has anyone ever met him?
No, nobody's ever met him, and it's crazy because I've heard that like some of the like roots of his name are like central,
right,
and like intelligence, and so it's like a little interesting where like
it starts to get like down the rabbit hole, and it's kind of like, okay, now I really don't want to invest in this because I where is this coming from, and where does it originate, and
no, that's why I kind of tied it into like maybe like. Because on the blockchain, when you make everybody can see it. You have a hash. It's not like it's not gonna say like Kropf. It's not gonna say like Igmer. It's gonna be like some digital hash. But you could technically track it and find like every transaction you made. Let's say you go to Guns and Fisherman's, and you bought something, right? They could see that. Like they could technically see that you made that.
Right.
And imagine tying that now into the digital ID.
Right.
So it's like oh, what the hell is really going on in the background, right?
Exactly. So,
and I have heard Oracle hasn't said it straight out, but they have a cryptocurrency, like some type of token, I believe.
Yeah,
coin.
Wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. So this whole world is something that I don't understand enough to put even one penny of my hard-earned money into it. And I just tell people that well, if you worked for it and you earned it, you can spend it any way you want. But I'm not buying into it. And I think it's interesting because it started out as a kind of very libertarian idea. We're going to get away from the government and stuff like that.
It did, yeah.
But the government might end up bailing it out.
Yeah.
So how libertarian is that? To me,
centralized as hell at that point.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Exactly. So.
And it did move all from that, from how you're saying decentralized tech. It straight up went to centralized tech, I definitely see what you're saying. Like it definitely went away from what it was supposed to be, and went into some. It's almost corporate as hell, like hierarchy and all that stuff that we've been talking about.
And a couple of these guys, like Sam Bankman-Fried and some others, have really gotten popped for, just doing some crazy stuff with all the money they collect from this. So there's a lot of corruption, and I just kind of feel like. A lot of the people who kind of backed it in a philosophical sense are now going to be in a really difficult position to explain themselves if the government ultimately comes in and then bails it out with other people's money. I'm no economic genius, okay? And I've made some very bad economic decisions in my life, okay? But I feel like I was smart enough to not buy into this. But the irony is they're going to take money out of my paycheck to bail out the people who were smart enough to rip everybody off.
Shoot,
and that hurts.
That's I never even thought of
power.
that.
That's power.
That's power. I love that you said that. That's power. Holy crap! I
don't pay my taxes, and they put me in jail.
Right.
But I have no power then to say, hey, don't use my tax money to bail out these millionaires that lost all money in crypto. All right. If you're going to use my money to bail anybody out, bail out some of these homeless people on the street who are hungry. Bail them out. Yeah. They need the money. Don't bail out some millionaire or billionaire. All right. See, that's the problem. Is I don't, as a people, we don't have really that much power to determine, where our tax money goes. We get thrown in jail if we don't pay it. And then they use it for war and for calamity and to bail out other rich people who have made bad mistakes. And this is why there's so much frustration, I think, so much anger, but it's being directed, I think, at each other. Got to figure out a way to change that. We got a lot of hate in the United States right now. And, you see, sort of liberals looking down their nose at poor white people, who support Trump. And then you got Trump people who, look at liberals and, you guys are just, and all the identity politics and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And, it's a problem because it for me, it takes our eye off,
the real serious stuff,
real
like
serious
homelessness,
stuff. Right.
like Medicare for all,
Right.
ending the wars, like those type of things. Like,
Right.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
And
we end up just kind of like yelling at each other and hating on each other.
And that's how they pass these bills on the side where they're like,
Yeah.
whoop, whoop, whoop.
Exactly.
Like, yeah.
So, getting away from that is going to be pretty tough. But, I think that, we certainly have the potential to do it. I mean, human beings are pretty smart creatures for the most part. We lose our way sometimes.
I kind of want to touch back on the prompts that you were talking about earlier. You mentioned the Ukraine and Russia one. I did the Iran one. You even had the coming war on China, which you kind of talked about a bit. But I feel like there's also like another one. Do you feel like Xi's like kind of like a China first guy? Like kind of like, let's say, like, do you feel like MAGA's like, like America first kind of stuff, like the Gulf of Mexico being the Gulf of America now, like
Yeah.
that.
I mean, I think that Xi understands that he's gonna, in order to kind of carry out whatever he's thinking he wants to do, he's first going to have to make sure that the Chinese people can live, lives of dignity and not be impoverished like they have been for so many centuries, sort of under the heel of Western imperialism. So I think he knows he needs to do that first. I mean, I'm not necessarily one who, attributes some sort of evil, bad intentions to him. I know that a lot of people in government say that, he's this, horrific authoritarian leader who, suppresses his own people.
So one of the
we have that here. I mean,
one of the reasons I asked that is because like Mexico's president right now is like, she's like, and she's like, I would think, because I'm Mexican American.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're all Catholics out there. It's kind of crazy to see. Maybe what I would say like kind of like a Zionist get put there. Like, but my thing is like, imagine if Mexico had a Mexico first president, where he was like, you know what, we're geopolitically, we're not in a bad place. Like we make good deals with Iran, Russia, China. Like they have a lot of stuff happening with Chinese. Like I don't know. So I'm kind of like, imagine if there was a Mexico first president. I wonder what that would like geopolitically, how that would like.
Well, I think Claudia Sheinbaum is Mexico first, actually. Mm-hmm. I think she's just very smart about it. Mm-hmm. She realizes that, if I start, calling in the Chinese military and we start putting bases in Tijuana, that's going to earn us the wrath of the United States. She's not stupid. She's a very smart leader. Mm-hmm. I think that, most countries of the world realize that, if they're going to kind of change geopolitical partnerships, they're going to have to do it slowly and deliberately. And carefully, so that they don't subject themselves to the wrath of the United States. Mm-hmm. I think, going back to Xi, I think that, I think a lot of it just kind of depends on whether or not, you can attribute true believer status to him. I mean, I think that, is he really a communist or someone who believes in Maoism or Marxism, Leninism? Does he really believe that we'll someday live in a classless society? I think that's kind of hard to know.
Did you see that Putin and him were talking about immortality?
Xi
and Putin were talking about immortality. Like, there's a video of them like talking, like walking. You should look that. You should look that up. It's crazy.
Was it just kind of a casual discussion?
You know what? I wouldn't be able to tell you, but it was kind of hitting. It was kind of hitting like news stuff where like alternative media, like right. Like they were like, these guys are talking about immortality. Like what the heck? So I kind of like interesting that you bring up like the classless thing. That I wonder what they would think like if they're really achieving that. Like, what's y'all real goal?
Well, I
Like,
know that Putin, for instance, I think is, he's pretty much a neoliberal. I don't think he really. I mean, I I think I think that they understand that a lot of what went down in the 20th century is not going to work in the 21st, and so I think they're both probably very skeptical of any kind of authoritarian communism. Okay.
I find that so what do you call it? Almost it's kind of not depressing. I would say like disappointing. I find that kind of stuff disappointing because it seems like when you towards the political compass, it seems like all of these governments are always up here.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've never seen.
Naturally.
Yeah, they're naturally just up here. And I feel like I've never seen a government, how we say, come down here.
Well, I think, going back to when we talked earlier about Buenaventura Durruti, I mean, I think that's what he was a libertarian socialist. A lot of the people, I think that were working in various movements in the 19th and 20th centuries were I guess what you could call left libertarians. It's not a world that has come into being yet. It's just a world that I think we can theorize. I think that's what makes it so easy for people who are authoritarian to dismiss it, is they can just kind of write it off as being utopian. And people, in a civilized world, you always need leaders and you need followers and that kind of nonsense, and so it's very easy to write it off. And then, of course, they've got, an army of, people within academia and, within governments and stuff like that will write, journalists, that will write and support that idea that, we all need daddy to, some big daddy to lead us and rule over us and so on and so forth. But, it's hard to kill an idea. So I think it sort of, it percolates,
like
it persists. People are like, yeah, I don't feel good. I don't like the way things are. I feel burdened. I feel unfree. I feel like people are making judgments about me that they shouldn't be, things they shouldn't be judging. And it's that weight of authoritarianism that I think that we all continue to feel into the 21st century, that, we need to figure out a way to throw off. It's just one of those things that I think, I guess as I've gotten older, when I was a young man, I wasn't very patient. But patience, I think, is something you develop as you get older. And I think young people, it frustrates them a lot. Somebody once said, patience is an old man's excuse. But my point is that I think ultimately you have to kind of come to grips and accept that a lot of the changes that you want to see and the direction that you want humanity to go, you may not live long enough to see. And then you have to make a decision on whether you want to fight for it or not. And it's like Antonio Gramsci, the Italian communist. He once said that, he maintained a pessimism of the intellect, but an optimism of the will. And I remember when I read that, I thought that's a good way to live. In other words, never convince yourself that everything's going to turn out okay, because it might not. And I mean, if you got a brain, you got to know that we're up against a lot, and it could end very badly. That's the pessimism of the intellect. But the optimism of the will is kind of the opposite of that. It's where you get up and you say every day, and you say, but I'm going to still keep fighting. I'm going to still keep, and for me as a teacher, I'm still going to keep trying to get people interested in this. I'm going to still try and get people to think about it, talk about it, be more imaginative, not accept what people in authority tell us, it has to be this way and can be no other. But I have to know that I might give some students attention, and maybe a bunch of them won't listen to me, but I'm still going to get up and do it every day. I'm going to just keep fighting. A lot of what I hope to see in my lifetime, I probably won't live to see, but it won't matter because, I think when it's all said and done, in those last few moments, you just have to kind of just look back and think, I don't know, try and find some meaning to, what was the meaning of your life? And I think that if you feel like you struggled for something, maybe that was more important than just yourself, you can leave the earth feeling okay, not frustrated, not disappointed.
Right. Not disappointed. Yeah.
Yeah, to me that would be the worst way to go. And I think so many people probably in their last few moments just they're more filled with disappointment than they are with a feeling of joy. And it's just kind of like, man, that was a good fight, and it was worth every second.
Sheesh. Oh, that's a big statement. Wow.
You're too young to get it.
No,
you get older, Ingmar, okay, then you'll be like, okay, now I know what he's talking about.
I hope I can look back at this and be like, I do get it.
No. I'm teasing you, man. I think because anybody can understand it. I think it's just when you're young. I think it's you just got so much going on in your head, and there's just so much going on in the world. But I think as you age, you realize that there is no meaning to life. It only means what you have made it or meant it to be. And I think a life of struggle, I think, does give people meaning to their lives. But it's got to be a struggle for others. It can't be just for yourself. I know that there's probably a lot of people that struggle for power and wealth or both. I don't know, man. I wouldn't want to be them on my last few moments.
Right.
It'd be sad, I think. Yeah. I mean, I think, devoting your life to, wanting to help your fellow man, woman.
That would be more fulfilling.
Yeah. I think you'd feel better at the end. And, I don't want to speak for any of these billionaires. Who knows? Maybe the person with the most.
No, yeah, I heard. Don't worry, I heard the founder of ChatGPT said that he hasn't slept good since ChatGPT hit production. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head. No, man.
Yeah, I think sometimes, well, it's that Frankenstein idea. Mary Shelley had it, centuries ago. That's what Frankenstein is about. Be careful what you create, because it can turn into a monster. So I know a lot of people would, like, for instance, remember that documentary they did a few years back? What was it called? Social.
I know what you're talking about. Social with algorithms, like we're like showing you people.
The people that were most disappointed and that admitted on camera that, hey, I don't even let my kids use any of this stuff, were people who designed it.
Right.
So sometimes we can create things that we look back on and think, well, maybe this wasn't such a great idea. But once the cat's out of the bag, you just have to try and make the best of it. So, like I said, this is a type of social media. I mean, if people can get information and become aware about the world through these sort of alternatives ways, that's a good thing. Okay, it's just that double-edged sword. You just have to try and get people to use it in the right way, not in an authoritarian way like you have to watch this, but in a way that piques their curiosity. Human beings are very curious creatures. We're very curious about our world.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think this was a pretty cool thing. I want to have more teachers on, so like I definitely. Right. Oh dang, I really appreciate you coming on.
I'm just so good it's so good to see you again, man.
No, dude, it's been awesome. Like again, one of my best teachers that I've ever had. Like y'all don't even get it. I've had a lot of teachers, a lot of great ones, but this one, it's different. Like he got so crazy knowledge. It's also my major, like a little background to me. So
shame on you.
I have computer science background too, but yeah.
Well, you were one of my great students, and I mean, I love what you're doing with your life and with your work, and I think it's so positive. So I wish this for all my students. That they can kind of
I hope they do. I hope that some of them get to see this and they get juiced about it. Like, maybe inspire them a bit, because like this is big, man. Like I was saying, you were at the No Kings thing. Like the world is changing a lot. Geopolitically, like domestic affairs are changing a lot, like the freaking ice raids that are happening, different things, right? So yeah, no, I think I'm happy that you came. Like I feel like you got a lot of knowledge on this, and that how we're saying, like a lot of kids or like people in high school and going to starting DVC, like it'll help them get a different perspective on things.
I hope so.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you one more time. Appreciate you, Mr. Kropf.
My boy. All right. Yeah. My son.